So this is Hebrews lesson 4. And this week we are going to be looking at the priesthood and comparing the three different priesthoods and see what the message is to the Hebrews here. So if everybody's ready, let's dig in. Okay. So first of all, we want to look at what you saw back in lesson 1. Lesson 1 was in chapter 5 and talked about, he brings up the subject of the priesthood in lesson 1. So we're going to go back to that and just talk about some of the basics that you learned about the priesthood from lesson 1, which would be on page 30 in your homework. We're going to start building a basis for the Aaronic priesthood and then comparing it with Melchizedek and Jesus. So if you page 30 in your homework would give you where you would have written things down, unless you just went back to lesson 1, as I did, and just looked at it. And then you would just have that would be in lesson 1, page 4, 5. Is everybody following me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So what do we learn about the priesthood as he begins to talk about that?
Are you wanting to know about the Levitical priesthood or Melchizedek or Jesus or which or
We're
any?
talking about, and from chapter 5, he's talking about the Aaronic priesthood there. He starts talking about, this is the one that they are now currently living under. Yeah. So yeah.
So I remember noting in lesson 1 that the priests all descend from Aaron and the tribe of Levi, but not all Levites are priests. So that was like the first thing I remember writing down in that lesson that I learned, was reminded of.
Right. Thank you. Because that's the foundation right there.
Right.
For the Aaronic priesthood. It's from the tribe of Levi, but from the household of Aaron. Right? So not all Levites are priests, only those who descend from Aaron. And the rest of the Levites maintain the temple. Okay. What else did you learn about the priesthood from chapter 5?
Well, also, Aaron's priesthood was temporary because the priests were men and they died. So.
Also, the Aaron priests had to make sacrifices for themselves to have their sins forgiven.
Before they could sacrifice for the people.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And they had a way of dealing with, or they had to deal with ignorant and wayward individuals, since the priest himself has weaknesses. So he knew he could do that.
Right. He could relate.
He could relate.
Right. And deal gently with people, right?
Right.
So what happened we're still in lesson 1. What happened to anyone who challenged the priesthood?
Well, they died.
Put to death, I think.
Yeah.
So if you remember, we had Korah, who was a Levite, right? Yeah. But not from the family of Aaron. And so he challenged, so he wanted to be, he's like, well, why aren't we all priests? You know, and he challenged it. And as you've said, he died. Okay. And there was another challenge to the priesthood by a king, King Uzziah. Okay. And go ahead, Nancy.
He got leprosy. That was his what he was known for. He was had leprosy.
Yeah. For how long?
Life.
the rest of his life.
Till he died.
Life, he died
Right.
with it.
Yeah. And he was excluded from the temple, right?
Mhm.
So that was he was, I guess, fortunate that he wasn't killed instantly, but living with leprosy is not really fortunate. So what does that tell us about how God views the priesthood?
Very seriously.
Very seriously. And again, because we are leading up to Jesus being the priest, so it has to be how God designed it. And any challenge to it is going to be met, with severity. Everybody understand that? These were the basics that we picked up in chapter 5. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move on, and we're going to look at these three priesthoods. Now, on page 29 in your homework, you have a chart that we were filling out, the things that we learned about each one. So let's talk about the Aaronic priesthood, which is the one that they live under currently. So tell me what you learn about that particular priesthood.
I have they act on behalf of men in relation to God to offer sacrifices for sins. That was in 5:1.
Mm-hmm. So that's their role, to act on behalf of men in relationship to God.
Just to ask one question, it also said to offer gifts for sin.
And sacrifices.
Yes, David said
Mhm.
offer sacrifices for sin, but it said offer gifts for sin. That threw me a little bit.
Okay, yeah. And that's something we would need to look into more, which you would probably find in Leviticus.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, what else do we learn about these priests?
In 5:2, they deal gently with the ignorant and misguided.
Okay,
Because they were human and
right.
yeah.
And he offers sacrifices for his own sin as well as the sins of the people.
Mhm. What do you learn about them in relationship to tithes?
They receive the tithes
Okay.
of the rest of the population.
And why is that?
That's their portion.
They,
That's what they live on. That's their portion.
they didn't
Right.
work otherwise. They didn't do any other way of making money, or they were to be supported by the other tribes, I think.
You think right.
Mhm.
Yeah. They were not given land.
No.
So they are supported by the other tribes.
And in 7:9, they paid tithes.
In 7:9, okay, we need to talk about that, okay? Because that is in relationship to Melchizedek.
That's the only place I saw that in relation to.
Because they don't pay tithes.
I think that verse actually says that Levi paid tithes to Melchizedek through Abraham because he was of Abraham's lineage.
Right. So we're going to sort that out in a minute because that's going to show us the priority, okay, of the Levites versus Abraham and Melchizedek. Okay, so the Aaronic priests did not pay tithes. Okay? They received tithes from the people. Anything else you saw about them and their priesthood? How were they appointed priests?
verse 4 says, no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God.
Right.
Mhm. And look at verse 5 while you're there.
And Christ was appointed to the priesthood, high priest.
Okay. What's the beginning of verse 5 talk about?
And those descendants of Levi who received the
yes.
priestly office.
Yes, the descendants of Levi. So they were made priests based on their genealogy. Correct?
Period.
Okay. And that's why when the priesthood was challenged by I forgot his name already.
Oh, Korah.
Korah.
Yeah, right. Right. When it was challenged by him, he's a Levite, but he wasn't from Aaron. And so he had no access to the priesthood. But here, this is how the Aaronic priests were appointed. It would be through their line of genealogy and succession, through Aaron, from Aaron to his sons to their sons, etc., etc. So that's how they became priests. Okay? Now, let's talk about Melchizedek. Because now it talks about him in what, verse 9? Oh, so it's in verse 1, actually. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in verse 1.
Yeah.
So what did we learn about him, starting with verse 1?
He was the king of Salem, and he was a high priest.
Okay.
Is Salem like Jerusalem? Where is that?
That is the thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the precursor to Jerusalem. That's what I saw too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I write that down?
Yeah. What else did we learn about him?
He blessed Abraham when he returned from this conquering these kings.
Okay, so when does Melchizedek live? At what point in history?
Always.
He seems to have no beginning and no genealogy, no end.
But when did we know that he actually walked the earth?
When Abraham was
Abraham's.
here.
When he was still
Right.
Abram, yeah.
Right. So during the time of Abraham, he was. So this goes, his priesthood is way before the Levitical priesthood. Okay. Way before. So what else do we learn about him other than, what does his name mean?
King of righteousness.
Okay. Yeah, King of righteousness.
And King of peace.
And King of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And who did he serve?
He served the
Most
most
High God.
high God.
The Most High God. We're talking about God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We're talking about that God.
Yeah.
Okay. But we're talking about this years before the Levitical priesthood.
Right.
Makes you wonder how God revealed himself to Melchizedek back then. How did he know? I'm just amazed that there's so much written about him in Hebrews. There's only 4 verses in the whole Old Testament about Melchizedek.
Right.
Yeah. Which is like, it would have been helpful to all of us if they had written a little bit more. Yeah. But I always feel like, okay, if it's not said, then what's not said is not as important as what is said.
Right.
So then our job is to look at what is said and then figure out why is it said now and what's the message that we're supposed to get from this. Okay.
Right. Because the only other reference is Psalms 110:4.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the only three Hebrews included with Genesis 14. It's the only three places. But there is a great deal of information there.
Well, let's hear that great deal of information.
Yeah.
I think if sometimes I get mixed up on pronouns, but it says he has an indestructible life.
Yeah.
And that he resembles the Son of God.
Okay, so he resembles the Son of God. There was a question in your homework that said, which way is it, right? And it says he resembles the Son of God. Carla, I'm glad you said you get mixed up on the pronouns sometimes, because I want to look at that section because it is easy to get mixed up on pronouns. And I want to read through this part where it talks about the indestructible life and see who are we talking about. Okay. Because I went over this again today because I thought, wait, is this about Melchizedek or is this about Jesus? Okay. So if you want to look with me at chapter 7, verse 11, we're going to just look through these verses. Just follow this. Let's see, who are we talking about? Verse 11. Now, if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need would there have been for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek? So there's a need for another priest to arise. We're talking about Jesus, are we not?
Yes.
Okay. There would not have been a need if the Levitical system were perfect. Okay. So we're talking about another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek, rather than one named after the order of Aaron. Okay, because that one doesn't work. Okay, it's obsolete now, so doesn't work. So verse 12, for there's a because. When there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law as well. For the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. Okay, so which tribe were the priests from?
Judah.
Judah.
Yeah, so this is now
Jesus
Judah.
is from Judah.
Judah.
Where are the Aaronic priests from?
Levi.
Levites. Okay.
Specifically
So,
Aaron's household.
so they're pointing out here the difference. It says, for the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar, because it was always the Levites. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah. Right. So we're talking about Jesus and all of this still, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Jesus. Another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek. He's from the tribe of Judah. He's from the tribe of Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. Okay.
Right.
Okay. This becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek. So who's the other priest that arises?
Jesus.
Jesus. Okay. In the likeness of Melchizedek.
Right.
Who has become, verse 16, who has become a priest, not on the basis of legal requirement. Okay, not on the basis of belonging to the house of Aaron.
Lineage.
Okay, concerning bodily descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. It is witnessed of him. Who are we talking about?
Jesus.
Jesus still. Yeah. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek.
Right.
So Jesus is this priest that replaces the Aaronic priest, not based on his genealogy, but based on the power of an indestructible life.
Okay.
So the way I see that, the indestructible life is talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, we can compare that to what else we learned about Melchizedek, where it says he had no beginning and no end.
Right.
Right? Which I'm not totally understanding. Okay. But here's what it says about Jesus. He has an indestructible life, which we know to be true. Okay.
Amen. Mhm.
And you are a priest forever. Okay. After the order of Melchizedek. So all of those, what I'm trying to show you there is all of those pronouns from 11 to 17 are about Jesus. And sometimes you have to really just look at it and follow the context and say, well, who's he talking about? Is he still talking about that person? Yes. Is he still talking about that person? Yes. Okay. So that helps us to understand. And we know for certain Jesus is the one with the power of an indestructible life. So let's go back to what we see about Melchizedek then, and see how does that maybe relate to Jesus. We've talked about he's king of Salem. He's the priest of the Most High God. So he's king and priest. His name means peace.
King of peace, yeah.
Yeah.
King of peace, king of righteousness. What else do you have on your list?
Abraham paid tithes to him.
Okay, Abraham paid tithes to him.
He's without genealogy.
Yep. All that.
Without, Jim, was that you saying he's without genealogy?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
He also blessed Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
It's
3 said he's like the Son of God.
Yeah, like the Son of God. Dave, were you saying something?
Well, it's confusing about the part about having no genealogy, and I was, there were some footnotes in my Bible that said, there were a lot of kings back there. They don't give their, he may have had a genealogy, just wasn't given in there. They don't say it, and because there's kind of like two theories on that. The other theory is that this may have actually been an appearance of Jesus in the form of Melchizedek, briefly back in that time. That's, to me, seems to be stretching it a little, but it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But just because he doesn't have a
I always heard the
genealogy,
term type.
it doesn't, he was a living person, so
Yeah.
he's not unless you're thinking he's incarnate or something. He probably did have a genealogy. It's just not recorded.
I've heard the term type of Christ before.
Yes.
I don't know what that means exactly, but.
Well, and it does say that he was made like the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Made like the Son of God.
Do you think the genealogy was mentioned only because of the Hebrews are so engrossed in having that specific genealogy in their background?
Could be.
That's how I viewed it, was that this is a book built on genealogies, right? I mean, the whole Pentateuch really, but especially Genesis. And I think the context is he doesn't have one recorded. The leap that he's divine, I like David, I don't think I made that leap either, but it could be certainly God appointed.
Yeah, somehow God revealed himself to him. Even though he's not a Jew or anything, but yet he's one of the rare, somehow he was the priest of the Most High God. So he had to know about about God, not God's plural. He maybe one of the first people to grasp the idea of, no, there is one God.
Yeah.
The other thing that's confusing is the last sentence in verse 3, where it says, he continues a priest forever. So where is he right now?
Yeah.
Right. See, that's
Well-
the thing that's all confusing. Okay.
The commentary that I went into after, when we were allowed to, says, or is it evidence that Melchizedek was actually Jesus appearing in the Old Testament, and which Jesus' priesthood remains today and into eternity? So it was, that was a thought that came.
Mhm. Yeah. And this is the thing that should be comforting to us, because people who write those commentaries all disagree.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it could be this or it could be this, but
Yep.
but nobody is certain about what it is.
Yeah.
So here we are. We are not going to figure that all out, but we are going to figure out, or try to figure out, why he is mentioned here and how it relates to the priesthood and to these Hebrews. Okay, so for a minute now, let's talk about how Abraham paid tithes to him, because we want to look at priority. What is this priesthood? Okay, so what do we see about how Abraham paid tithes to him?
Well, you've got these two odd verses, I think, 9 and 10. Paid when he's still in the loins, and I'm doing the Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi. So Levi wasn't born yet, but Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. So I found that a bit confusing, and then I sort of, but it's just a wee bit.
So that implies that Abraham, as Abram, was lower in stature than Melchizedek.
Yeah.
Because Melchizedek received the tithe, and he also blessed Abram, which the one blessed has got to be higher than the one who receives the blessing, I think.
And Levi was still in the loins of his father. So,
Right. Yeah. So Levi was not born yet.
No.
But it clearly says that Melchizedek is superior to Abraham.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's add in the other confusing verse that Patricia's talking about Levi. I have to turn the page here.
Is that 9?
Yeah, verse 9.
Mm-hmm. Because he says, and again, they're trying to give you a picture, okay, of this. One might even say that Levi himself, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, for he was still in the loins of his ancestor when Melchizedek met him. So just trying to picture the priority here. Melchizedek is above Abraham.
Right.
And Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, right? So then if you follow that line down, then it would be Levi would also have paid tithes to Melchizedek. If, because it's the Levitical priesthood, that line. So they're saying, even if Levi were born, he would have paid tithes to Melchizedek.
Mm-hmm.
In the order of things. Okay, so Melchizedek would have been superior to Levi as he was to Abraham. What do you think?
You're thinking.
Yeah, I can see you all thinking. Yeah.
Now that makes sense, but it just kind of is a roundabout way of saying, because somebody said earlier, but Levi did pay tithes, but it was really only through Abraham.
Right. Right. So he never did really, but he would have.
Yeah.
I mean, it just in trying to see the line of succession here and the priority of one priesthood over the other, so that Melchizedek's priesthood is superior. Okay. Then along comes much later the Aaronic priesthood set up, okay, and it is not as superior as Melchizedek's, and they would have paid tithes as Abraham did. They would have paid tithes to him, right, in that system. So he's just trying to show them, and again, this is why it's so important to keep the whole book in mind. He's writing to Hebrew believers.
Right.
And he's trying to show them we're in that change from Old Testament to New.
Right.
And there's a better system. Better. Okay. And so he's trying to show them that priority of the priesthood. So priority is Melchizedek, then Abraham pays Melchizedek, and Levi, actually through the lineage of Abraham, would have also paid tithes to that priesthood versus the Levitical priesthood. Okay. Is your head spinning? Yeah. Okay. So
it might have been useful because of tying the Levi into, in just going back and showing them, okay, Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek. I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sure. But after Abraham, eventually came Levi, whose family, Aaron's family of Levi eventually became the priest, but they themselves would have paid tithes because this person is more superior than even Abraham. So it probably tied in and made more sense to that time period of understanding all of the genealogy.
Right, right. Because the Levitical priests were always appointed on the basis of their genealogy, but not Melchizedek. And here's the other thing. He's just throwing out that name to them like they know him. Right? They apparently would have known that Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. So because he's not going into explanation, these are the Hebrews. These are the Hebrews who grew up in that whole system.
Yeah.
So he's just saying it like, oh, matter of factly, where we, on the other hand, we don't understand. But now, again, what he's trying to show them is that there's a superior priesthood. There's a superior priesthood to the Levitical one, to the Aaronic one.
Yeah.
And that's where now Jesus comes in. And we want to compare Jesus to Melchizedek.
Is it true or not true that the Pentateuch was handed down generation to generation via spoken word, and they memorized it? Now at this time, I know they had the scrolls, so they were reading, and some of it had been put down into writing at this point. But didn't they pass it down word to word? And maybe that's why it makes more sense.
Oh, possibly, yeah. I'm not giving thought to that, but of course, in the beginning, they didn't have it all written down, so they would have.
Yeah.
And yes, and
it was word to word. They had to memorize it.
Right. Right.
And so, how much of that in the different families was it continually passed down? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's something we could look at, but that's a good thought that may be why they were more understanding of that. But so let's look at Jesus now. What did you learn about Jesus and his priesthood?
He was made a high priest. He didn't exalt himself.
Yeah, that's 5:5.
Okay.
Appointed by God.
Right.
And he's a priest forever. That was in the next verse, 6.
Yep. In the days of his flesh, he offered prayers and supplications, which is important, relating back to the Aaronic priesthood for sure, that he did that in his flesh. Go ahead, David.
I say, and he was heard because of his reverence. I like that too.
Yeah. And I love the next one. Being made perfect became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him.
Yep.
Okay, and remember what we said about being made perfect.
Yes, complete.
Complete. Being ready to accept the intended goal, right? So he was ready for that, because it says when he was ready, then he became our high priest.
Right.
Okay. And what tribe is he from?
Judah.
Judah. Okay. So again, in those section we read before in verse 16, he was not a priest on the basis of legal requirement of genealogy. But verse 17, by the power, the power of an indestructible life, because God said, okay, let's talk about that for a minute. The oath. Okay, I'm getting myself out of order here, but the priests, the Levitical priests were here. Oh, it's at the end of chapter 7, verse 28. The law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. So the oath, he is appointed by an oath from God. A covenant, if you will. Courtney, there's that word again. Yeah, covenant. Okay. Blythe, do you want to just share what you were talking about before class started about those cross references in Isaiah?
Yeah, it was on, let's see, page 31, and just that one question number 2, I found it really interesting looking back in Isaiah, and I kind of wrote out phrases from the verses of each, and then the Hebrews 1:8 and the Hebrews 7:1-3, and then I underlined like the same words, kingdom, righteousness, forevermore, or forever and ever. It was just interesting. I love parallels like that throughout scripture, and so I just enjoyed that exercise.
Yeah, so the whole thing we talked about Melchizedek being king of righteousness, and then you have in Isaiah talking about Jesus, the prophecy about Jesus being having the righteous scepter, and so those parallels about king and priest of peace, Jesus, the king of peace, king of righteousness, the high priest, although was the prophecy from Isaiah, okay, that matches up Melchizedek and Jesus. So let's try to tie this together. If we go back to comparing now the two types of priesthood, the contrast of the priesthood. In verse in 7:11, in 7:11 through 28, it contrasts the priesthood itself. The priesthood of Jesus versus the priesthood of the Levitical priesthood. Okay. Why is there a change? Why is there a change?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but I would say that in verse 19, it talks about the fact that the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced. And then in verse 22, it's a better covenant. And then in verse 27, it's once and for all. It's finished.
Right. It's like because the law made nothing perfect. We talked about that, right? And verse 11, if you go back up that high, it's the beginning of that thought process. If perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, right, then there would be no need for another priest to arise. But it could not make people perfect. It could not change the heart. It was just all external. And so if it had said, if perfection had been attainable through that Levitical system, there would not be a need for a change.
There wouldn't
But
be a
since
need for Jesus.
Right. Right. So now we have Jesus coming. One arises after the order of Melchizedek, right, which is a better, right? Melchizedek was a better priesthood than the Levitical system, okay? And now, so we have a new priest arising, Jesus, with a better hope, and he is forever. Okay? Lives forever. So he offers a better hope, and one in which we can draw near to God. In the old system, how did that work? Could they draw near to God?
No.
No.
Always through the priest. Yeah.
Through the priest.
Yeah.
Right, through the high priest, okay? But now, we're going to see this in chapter 10, which I love. The curtain is torn in two.
Yeah.
Curtain is torn in two, making way for us to approach God. So he's saying there's a better hope. We see that word better through this entire book, talking to these Hebrew believers. There is a better, Jesus is a better than the angels, better than the priest, the high priest. He's a better high priest. He's a better sacrifice. He is a better, it's all better than the old system. Because remember, they've come from that and now they're rethinking it. Should I go back to that because of the persecution? And he's like, no. This is better. This is far superior. And in fact, in chapter 8, the end of chapter 8, which you looked at briefly, it says, in speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. So the first one is obsolete. No more need for those priests because we have a much better high priest.
Seems like you could argue that without the new priesthood, you wouldn't have the new covenant. They go hand in hand.
Right. Absolutely.
Imagine if you have the new covenant, but an old priesthood. It doesn't even make sense.
No. You can't mix the two. One is obsolete. This is new. So my take on this is like he is trying to show them this new priesthood is not at all, it's different. It's different. It's not Levitical. It's not through genealogy. It is more on the order of Melchizedek, who was appointed by God. And Jesus is appointed by God through an oath. But he has to make them understand. So the picture, and here again, we look at pictures. What they know from the Old Testament is a picture of what they can understand from the New Testament. And so if they can understand a picture of Melchizedek, they can understand, oh, that's the kind of priesthood we're talking about, which is different and superior because Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek. So he is superior. And this new priesthood is of that order. It's superior.
So as you say, that would have meant much more to the Jewish people reading this than it did to us at first.
Mm-hmm.
It would mean a great deal to them.
Right.
I mean, we're understanding, but they would, as you say, they grew up with it. So,
Yeah.
And I think also it would have been very controversial.
Mm.
You know, this is a different way of thinking about life completely for that.
Yeah. And therefore the persecution.
I presume the Jewish people who haven't accepted the Messiah would still have a high priest. I don't know. I don't have any Jewish friends actually to know that.
No. Yeah. Well, they have their rabbis, and I'm not sure. I mean, they have no sacrifices.
No.
At the moment.
I know of I do know a Jewish family, and she is from the tribe of Levi, and he is not. And their son, therefore, is a Levite and holds a higher place in the family than the husband does because of that.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. They're still going by the Levitical genealogy.
Right.
And it's interesting that they have taken over red heifers, and they had their first sacrifice of a red heifer back in July. They're saying that it wasn't kosher, it was kosher. There's a big thing because they have the implements for the new temple, the third temple already built. And there's some very interesting websites out there that contain that information. So yes, they have someone in mind who could possibly go into that high priest, but he is still called a rabbi at this point in time.
Yeah.
They keep tabs of Levi very closely.
Levi's, right. Yeah.
So would it be oversimplifying, which I'm actually okay if you say that yes, what I'm about to say is oversimplifying, but
no, simple is good. Go ahead.
Okay. So it feels like to me, like this whole thing is just kind of stacking on top of each other. The whole time he's saying, this is better than, like, Jesus is better than this, Jesus is better than this, Jesus is better than this. And frankly, all of people that they find in very high esteem. And he's saying Jesus is better than all of this. And then in 5, he talks about him being the high priest. That feels like a big deal. And then 6, he talks about them being babies, not mature.
Right.
But then he's laying on, like, here's your history and here's why. But he doesn't just say Jesus is better. He says Jesus is better, and here is the proof of how Jesus is better through the line of Melchizedek. So what it feels like to me is that, as we've talked about a lot, like, you can't just take bits. You have to take the whole, because if you take it in chunks, if you take just the beginning of 6, you can really throw yourself into a tailspin of why does it say that? But like, realistically, he's just building on every sentence he says to get to the point where he's proven his case. And it is harder for us to understand because it isn't our heritage. But if we are taking the big picture of the Bible, we should be able to put that piece in place.
Yes. Yes to all of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and kind of, at least for us, in our perspective, for me, I think those last 3 verses, 26, 27, and 28, just puts it all in order why Jesus is superior. Where we have a high priest who's holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily for his own sins or for the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself.
Right. Yeah, that sums it up.
Yeah.
And for them, it was like Melchizedek was used as a picture. that they could understand to make the leap from Levitical priesthood to Jesus. The picture. So whether we understand everything about Melchizedek or not, point is he's using him to show them a better priestly system, different from the Levites, better than, okay, one that Abraham paid tithes to, okay, better than.
I put a little asterisk next to verse 25 because this answers the question is, what does all this mean to me? You know, it's all interesting stuff, but what does this mean to me? And it's consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost. So that's me, those who draw near to God through him. That's why this is all important to me. Otherwise, it's just kind of interesting history and
yeah. And you're right. And if we don't bring it down to that, why is it important to us? Then we've missed it all. So we do have this high priest who has given us more hope when we can approach God through him. So yeah, that's what it means to us. He can save us to the uttermost.
Joseph.
I got it. I'm okay.
Yeah. So thanks for wrapping that up for us, Dave, for making that application. Yeah. You all have been very good teachers today. Yeah. But I love how, you know, we take a hard passage and just all of us think for a week about it and study it and then bring our insights and make some sense of it. Okay.
And I love how you don't make, nobody is wrong. You correct us gently if we say something stupid. It's nice.
Thank you.
Like the high priest.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was
Thank
looking
you.
for that verse that talked about how he has to deal with I'm not going to find it. I don't want to even mention it. You know what I'm talking about. But yes, no, I appreciate all of your input every week and that we can. Joseph. Hi, Joseph. That we can sort it all out together. And do we actually know everything about Melchizedek? No. But we know the important things that help us to understand what he's trying to get across to these Hebrews about Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
All right. All right. We did it.
Yeah.
We did it.
One thing when I read this, you know, I have a mental list of questions that I want to ask God about someday. And this has added a new question is who wrote Hebrews? Because if it wasn't Paul, it had to be someone who's extremely well educated or extremely divinely inspired, because how he could figure out all of this from 4 verses in the Old Testament is, you know, there had to have been some divine insight given to the writer.
Right.